hot, 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 hot. Whoo, that's hot. Well, another windy day in the Panhandle. Can't seem to escape it. Guess that means it's another good day to work in the shop. So let's go in there and see what we got going on. So for those of y'all who don't know what's behind me here, this is my wax dipping tank. It's kind of ugly to look at, but this is a very important piece of equipment for my operation. So what I'm doing with it is wax dipping all the wood equipment that I've been building. And wax dipping is just a way to weatherproof the woodenware, kind of like painting, but it's a whole lot better than painting. What we're doing with the wax is heating it up to at least 250 degrees, and I'll run it, if it'll do it on that day, I'll run it up to 300 degrees. And basically what we're doing is deep frying the wood. So what I mean by that, we're sticking it in there and we're letting the hot wax boil out all of the moisture in the wood, like the water and the sap and all that stuff. Everything that contributes to the wood eventually rotting. So this is a way to prevent that. And unlike painting, this should last the lifetime of the piece of equipment. Unlike painting, you'll have to, every few years, probably need to reapply it. I have heard of people dipping stuff multiple times, years apart, but I think it's mostly for the looks, the aesthetics. I haven't seen any changes in the overall performance of it over the years. This is my fourth year to wax dip stuff. It didn't take me long to figure out this is the way to go for me, because I absolutely hate painting. So I think my second year of even having bees, I built this tank because I knew this is what I wanted to do with as far as my treating my stuff goes. So here are all my 6-frame nuke pallets that I've been documenting the build of, if you've been following along. I got these 3 stacks dipped, and I wanted to show y'all the kind of the difference. I have one here. One on the left has been dipped already and the one on the right hasn't, so I was just wanting to show the color difference. After the equipment's been dipped, it kind of looks like it's been stained or something. I really like the color that it turns out to be when it comes out of the tank. So like I mentioned earlier, this process is using the heat of the wax to boil out the moisture in the wood, and after that occurs, all the pores and voids in the wood is going to be replaced by the wax that's in the tank. So this will be a forever waterproof product. So that's a really nice thing about it. Like looking here at these pieces here, I can feel it, but I can't. Like if I scratch, I get just a little bit of wax under my fingernail, but it's not real noticeable to the touch. But so to kind of demonstrate how well it works, I wanted to do a little water test, and I'm gonna pour some water on each of these pallets, one treated, one untreated. And I'm thinking we'll leave it for about 30 minutes and we can come back, and the untreated, the water will probably be absorbed into the wood, and then the treated one will probably still have it beaded up on the surface, and we can just tilt it up and it'll flow right off. So a little splash there, and then over here, same thing. And you can already tell the difference. So there's that wet spot. Just the water's in a pool. It hasn't beaded off at all. Then you look at the wax dip palette and it's all beaded up, ready to come off. So we'll come back, I'm guessing in 30 minutes. So when I was first thinking about building one of these, I was looking for information on the internet, and I found a little bit. There were a few good sources, but I didn't find a whole lot. So I figure I'll kind of give an overview of my setup here and everything, just in case anybody's looking to do the same thing. So as I mentioned earlier, the temperature right now we're at about 275. I used a little thermostat that is the same one that's on the fish fryer that I use. Seems to work pretty good. And as far as the wax in the tank, it's a mix of paraffin and microcrystalline wax. There's a lot of, from what I remember the research I did, there was a lot of varying opinions on the ratio you should use, but right now I try to stick with a 50-50 ratio. When I first started out, I was doing 75% paraffin and 25% microcrystalline, I believe. Now the reasons for the different wax is paraffin has a melting point of around 120, I think. You can get different ones, but I think it's around 120. The microcrystalline is a lot higher, so it's going to be around 180 to 200, I believe. And the reason you want to do that is because if you just use paraffin, then like on a hot summer day, say when it's 105 degrees out, then the wax is going to tend to kind of weep out of your equipment, and it's going to be real tacky and, as you can imagine, like almost melted wax. So the purpose of the microcrystalline is to actually raise the melting point of the wax mixture that you're creating. So to try and avoid your equipment becoming tacky on hot days. So to kind of give an overview of the tank, I made mine, it's going to be 22 inches this way and 36 inches this way. Those are ID measurements. And it's going to be 32 inches deep. So when I made it, I was making it with the intention of dipping 6 deep boxes at a time. It can fit that many if you stack them in there right. Now with my inexperience, I wasn't accounting for the foam buildup when you wax dip stuff. So when you're boiling out the moisture and everything, that moisture is going to come out as foam, and it has to vent off somehow. So the problem with doing 6 boxes at a time was that would very quickly boil over and cause a problem. So as it turned out, I've been able to do, most of the time I only do 2 boxes at a time, side by side. It just creates so much foam, and that's all I can do. And as you can tell by looking at my tank, I have had 2 or 3 boilovers. It does happen. I knew it was a possibility when I started all of it, but It's just the variance with the moisture in the wood. And when I was just getting started, this is something important to know. I had this lid over here made. I made it with the intention of those little hoop pieces holding down the boxes in the wax after I shut it. Well, the problem with that was the lid would actually kind of hold in the moisture in the tank, so it would foam up real big, and then it would kind of condense up on the lid surface, and it wasn't able to escape. So the moisture staying in the wax and the wood in there creating more foam, it was a bad situation, and it would boil over. So I eventually learned, take the lid off, and that lets the moisture escape and go away, and your foam will stay down. So after I started doing that, my boil overs incidents went way down, way down. So a little important tidbit of information there. And just because of the amount of foam produced, I really wish I would have made the tank a whole lot bigger, just so that I want to be able to dip more boxes at once, but you got to have a whole lot of extra room to handle all the foam. So if I were able to do it over again, I would make the tank a whole lot bigger. So if you can see those blue flames under there, I have 2 burners sitting under the tank. They're high pressure burners. They're not like the regular low pressure that would be on your gas grill or anything like that. And right here I have a push button lighter. That is what's similar to what's on your gas grill. You get your gas flowing and then push that, and you can hear it arcing on there. So that makes it really easy to light, a little less dangerous. And here I have a 100-pound propane bottle supplying it. It's important to have a large tank if you're going to run burners like this, so your tank or your bottle doesn't freeze up while it's supplying the gas. And here, I think, if I remember right, it's a 0 to 30 psi regulator, but don't hold me to that, because I think it's 4 years ago when I got all this set up. And on the bottom there, I put some metal pieces around the bottom. I kind of called it a skirt, just to kind of keep if there was any airflow, to keep it from affecting the flames too much. They help a little bit, but if you're inside a building like here, it's kind of unnecessary as long as your building's sealed up well enough. Now, some people will say that you shouldn't do it indoors, which is probably a good idea, but here where I'm at, it's windy every single day, so there's no way I can do it outside and hold the flame and hold the heat in the tank. So I just make sure I'm careful and I do it indoors. I've never had an issue, but whenever I did have a boil over, the first thing I did was cut the flames off, get them shut off, because the wax is a petroleum product, so it's going to be flammable. So, for instance, if you did have a boil over and that wax got into the flames, you would have a major issue on your hands. And that's why most people say to have it outdoors. But I'm working with the cards I was dealt, and there's no way I can do it outside. So this is how I do it. And I always have a fire extinguisher handy, just for worst case scenario. So as you might guess, this process can get a little messy. That's why I have my floor covered in cardboard. That way I can keep the wax from getting on the concrete and causing me a whole lot of work. You'll need some heavy duty gloves to protect your hands because, as we mentioned earlier, that wax is 250 to 300 degrees, so that'll easily burn you. So I bought some welding gloves that I've just dedicated to wax dipping, and they work all right at first, but the more you handle the stuff, getting it out of the tank and everything, that heat absorbs into the gloves, and eventually your hands do get hot, but they don't get burned, so that's what you're trying to prevent. One thing I forgot to say was, normally I will dip everything for 12 to 15 minutes. These pallets I'm doing for a solid 15 minutes just because there's so much material there to penetrate. But I'll set a timer on my phone for 18 minutes because that's my turnaround time for one dip. And what I mean by that is I'll load the pallets in there and they will be submerged and being dipped for 15 minutes. But then it takes me 3 minutes to take them out and then put new ones in. So my whole cycle or turnaround time is 18 minutes. So I can almost get 4 dips an hour. Now when I'm doing just deep hive boxes, I usually do them for 12 minutes. And I can get 4 dips an hour. So if anybody was wondering about time and how much you can get done in a day, that's kind of what I do. I get up really early in the morning, say 4 or 5 o'clock, to fire this thing up because it's going to take it, depending on the ambient temperature, it's going to take it around 4 hours to get up to dipping temperature. But if you have a whole lot to do and you're dipping 2 days in a row, that second day it's not going to take near as long because it's going to have residual heat left over in the wax from the previous day. It'll usually take 2 to 3 hours to heat up on the second day. But I figured I'd set y'all up and y'all can kind of go through a time lapse and kind of see the foam when I put the wood in, kind of see the foam rise and fall as we go along. So then once we're done, we'll go back to the water test and I'll show y'all how that turned out. And nowadays I just use a cinder block or two to apply weight and to keep everything submerged. And as you can see, there's already a lot of foam being built, so let's time lapse it. figured y'all might want to see this part. I just pulled these out. You still see it still boiling, especially around the holes, staple holes. But as it cools, that remaining wax is going to be absorbed back into the wood. So, and then when you look at the end grain, it's always a good visual. And they are hot. Let's go check out the results of the water test. I don't know if we can get the good right angle where you can see it, but that water on the untreated has absorbed into the plywood. It's no longer there. You kind of see the wet spot there. And to the dipped pallet, still there, exactly the way it was before. Hasn't been absorbed at all. And then my favorite part. Just glides right off. Way better than painting. Well, there we have it. All 50 pallets are now wax dipped and ready for a long, useful life, I hope. Got all my U-clips on there. As I was waiting for one load to cook, I would put all my clips on there. I did them after because with them on the pallets, it would make it real hard to fit them all three of them there in the tank. So now it's time to start dipping the lids, and contrary to what I've been saying this whole video about how this is so much better than painting, I am going to go ahead and paint the lids after I dip them. And that's because after a few years, I have noticed that dipped woodenware tends to darken over time when it's exposed to the sun, and it's really seems to be really bad with the plywood. So like I made a bunch of lids for my 10 frame equipment all out of plywood, and they've gotten so dark that I'm thinking it's actually it may be hurting the bees in the summertime with darker colors attracting more sunlight and more heat. So in order to try to combat that, I'm going to paint just the tops of the lids. I'm going to paint them white to try to deflect sunlight. And when you paint dipped woodenware, you got to do it really soon after it comes out of your cooker, because you want that paint to be absorbed into the wood with the wax. If you try to paint it after it's cooled and everything, then you're not going to get the paint to stick. It'll just flake off eventually. So this is what they're going to look like. I did one as a test. I'll be using an oil-based paint. I've never done it before, but I think that's what I'm going to need to go for, since the whole water and wax not mixing and all that stuff. But what made me kind of think about doing this was last year we had a terrible heat spell. One day we got 110 or 115, and around here with no trees really to speak of, my hives are just out in the open. And I think that one day it got so hot, and those darker lids I think hurt but I think it cooked all the brood in my hives and really set them back. So that's what made me think of this, and I hope it works because it's going to be a lot of extra work, but I'm thinking it'll be worth it. And I think with the paint being absorbed with the wax, I think it's going to last a really long time. And I've tried to research it online, found a few sources. What I've just said here is about all I found, so I guess I'll try it and see how it turns out. Okie dokie, got the lids all knocked out, they're all dipped, and as y'all just saw, I was painting them. So this is actually, that's the first time I've ever painted anything that I've wax dipped, because dipping it, that's perfect as far as weatherproofing and protection goes for the wood. But the reason I'm painting these lids white is to try to reflect the sun and try to keep the temperature in the hive as low as possible. Last summer I had an issue. The thing with wax dipping is I've noticed over time the wood will kind of darken a little bit, and I'm thinking that's making the temperature in the hive maybe a little bit higher than what it could be. And last summer we had a terrible heat spell. One day it got up to near 115, I think, and it cooked all the brood in my hives, and that was right before I moved them to the cotton field, so it really set them back. So that's kind of what got this idea turning in my head, just to try to keep the bees try to keep them from getting too hot. That's all I'm trying to do. But if you're gonna paint anything that you wax dip, you gotta do it really soon after you take them out of the dipper. That wax absorbs into the wood, and when you put the paint on there, it gets absorbed along with it. I think it's gonna work really good. The benefit is you can roll it on there and it dries and absorbs real fast, and then I was rolling on a second coat, and I think it's gonna, hopefully it does what I'm wanting it to do. But 150 lids, it took 2 gallons of paint, and I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting half of that, but I'm fine with it. I mean, it hadn't been long at all. These lids are really hot, but the paint's all soaked in. And I tried these 2 on the end. I painted them before I dipped them, just to run a little test, see what would happen, and I pulled them out, and it was like a ugly cream color. So painted over best I could, but it didn't really stick well since there was already paint there. Here they are. And you can see just painting the tops, everything else is bare wood. Oh man, I'm glad to have all that done. But the thing is, I'm not done. I still need boxes. I don't know when I'm going to get around to building them. I've had a lot of stuff come up, a lot of work come up and kind of hit all at once, so I don't know when I'm going to get around to building them, but I need them fairly quick for splitting time, so just have to see. But if y'all have any questions or comments or anything about anything I went over today about the whole wax dipping setup and process, if you have any questions, let me know down in the comments. I'll be sure to read them and try to respond. Hopefully I got an answer, but I know I made this as a beekeeping channel and you haven't seen any bees yet, but don't worry. I think should be getting into some bees here pretty quick, so I don't know when the video will come out, but I'll be getting into some bees here soon, or I need to at least. I'm already I'm a little bit behind. Need to get in there and give them some pollen patties. That's my #1 goal. So don't worry, we'll be getting into some bees here pretty quick and hopefully show y'all what y'all actually came to the channel for. And on another note, I need everybody watching, I need y'all to go get your vehicles washed. I need you to do a rain dance. I need you to hope, wish, pray for rain, whatever you got to do, but we need a rain bad. We need multiple, not just one. This year's already shaping up to be like last year, and last year was not a good year. We need some wildflower honey. So I've said it before, but thanks to y'all who stick around and watch till the end. I hope y'all are finding the content somewhat interesting, but as I mentioned, hopefully it'll be getting a little more interesting as we go along here. So hope y'all stay tuned and we'll see y'all on the next one.